So thank you for the very kind introduction. Once again, my name is Brian McKeiver. I am actually from Grand Rapids. Anyone else west side today? All right, sweet. The drive was awesome last night, wasn't it? Got stuck in traffic for a bunch of time. I am a co-owner and solutions architect at BizStream. What that means is I get to write a little code, do sales, and also take out the trash, really. That's what it comes down to, okay? The company BizStream has been around for about 18 years, and I'm not sure yet whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing that I've been there for all 18. You can talk to my business partner, maybe he'd have a better idea, but it's been a long, strange, winding road. Started out with 2 people, we're now up to 32 people, and we are a Microsoft.NET development shop that builds websites, e-commerce, and native mobile apps for people around the country. And we specialize in content management system implementations that are kind of large, monolithic things. So basically today, what I want to go over is why would I have this idea for this talk? Because in my space, in my industry, we are challenged with wanting to put up these big, large systems that let different departments manage different parts of websites and do integration with things like CRMs and ERPs and financial systems, right? So this technology has been around for a long, long time. And it's really a traditional implementation. There's usually a database involved or multiple. There's usually an infrastructure team who has to connect the plumbing and do the security between that and the web server. Maybe there's multiple web servers. Maybe there's a DMZ. There's code that sometimes can be automatically deployed. Half the time it can't be because of all the fun governance around everything. And then, of course, then you get to the actual application layer, and there's all these things, right? What happens is that that's great for high availability, redundancy, sometimes even performance, but frankly, it's not always great for performance. And in today's world, when you have these large, kind of slow things, people are not thrilled by that, right? Not only the customers of the website, but also the people who work on it. And that's where I want to talk about this problem. How do we fix this today? And how do we get away from last decade's technology and how we move to modern and maybe even future technology? Basically, what happens is you get things like this on a mobile phone, right? You have a loading screen that just happens because the site has to spin up, especially in the .NET world. We have to do the just-in-time compile the first time if you don't do it the right way. And you see this white spinny screen, especially on your phone, if it's a large web page that you're trying to download with lots of assets. And then in today's world especially, after that loads, then you have to accept the location thing, and then there's probably like, oh my gosh, I've got to accept the cookie policy. And of course, by the time you get to that, then they want you to subscribe before you can even see the stupid web page, right? That's the state of the web in 2019, in my opinion, and it's frankly ridiculous. I hate when I have to click 6 times before I can actually read the article, right? Anybody else? Yeah, it's stupid. Marketers love it, though. They love it. Oops, too fast. But basically, you know, there's stats that show for every couple of seconds it takes to load a page, you're going to have less and less engagement with your visitors. Bounce rate's going to go up, as this chart shows in research done by Google, especially after 6 seconds, or between the 6 to 10 seconds. I think it's funny that you can have a higher than 100% bounce rate. Does that mean even the bots are leaving the site too? So Google doesn't love it. Here's another statistic that basically conversion rate is not helped when it's slow. There's lots of studies out there around like Amazon and Walmart and other major e-commerce players that the longer it takes the page to load, the less conversion rate there is, which is pretty interesting because you wouldn't necessarily think about that. But there's plenty of statistics and surveys that have done that really show it. So it's bad to have a slow website, right? It's also bad for SEO. Google does a mobile-first indexing of pages. The slower it is, that's actually kind of a negative factor these days if you have a very slow website. And then more importantly, what about us, right? Developers. This developer is not happy because she's probably working on SharePoint. Any SharePoint developers in the room? Sorry, sir, I'm going to bash it, right? I have done SharePoint since it was WSS 2.0, okay? I hate it now. Hate it, because it might take you 3 days to install the stupid thing, then the patch is not going to work, and then you got to reinstall it anyways. Maybe it's slightly better these days, but back in the old world, it was terrible. And I believe, you know, as someone who runs an agency and worries about developer happiness, that it's not just the performance of the site if you're working on old, large monolithic technologies. It's also the happiness level of your developers. We get a lot of people who join us in the last 3, 4, 5 years that they're not thrilled when you go, oh, can you go work on a Web Forms 2.0 .NET Framework thing? And they're like, what page lifecycle? What is this, right? They want to work with tools that they're used to. They want to have JavaScript frameworks. They want to do all the cool front-end things that Vue, Angular, React, all that kind of stuff. And in fact, there's been a pretty cool survey that was done by HackerRank that goes into like what developers want to do in 2019. I was pretty impressed. This is actually a really cool page if you want to hit it. But basically, developers want to learn things like React. Anyone in the room, React? Yeah, a couple more than SharePoint, right? And then there's other things like Vue, .NET Core. I'm a big .NET Core guy, I love it. And then a few that I've never heard of. Padrino, no idea. Anybody? Yeah, I have no idea what that is. I have to look it up. But not only do they want to learn things from a stack, they also want to learn things from a language standpoint. And the top 4 we have on here is Python, TypeScript, Go, and Kotlin. So, you know, C#, PHP, C, Java, it's not like anyone's clamoring to learn that in today's world, right? They really want to focus on these new things that they hear about that are the cool kids are doing. And I think that I have a pop quiz for you guys. How many monolithic CMSs or website platforms do you think are developed in those top 4 things that people want to learn? Anybody want to take a guess? None? There's one. Well, I'm kind of going for like the web application that runs on the language. Yeah, well, that's close. Django, thank you. Yes, very good. Is that you? Nice. Yes, Django is the only one that I could actually research from those 4 or 5 languages that has a MySQL database, has an installation package, it has the whole setup, right? It's not just developing files. So if there's only one, and developers want to learn this, maybe we can do something better. And that's what I'm going to do today. But while researching this, I found something really cool I just had to talk about. They actually surveyed what music do you listen to coding. And Dance Electric came as the number 1 category for the 22 to 37 age range. And I like, that's actually what I do. I listen to that pretty much when I'm coding. It was different as it goes up. But here's the deal, okay? Who the hell listens to classical music while they code? Maybe it's a SharePoint thing. I don't know. There's a couple of you. All right, that surprises me. I love pretty much all kinds of music, but there's 2 I really don't like. One is classical and the other is country. So sorry, country fans. Everything else I can listen to. And actually, we have a large Sonos thing in our office with 30 people. There's music battles all the time with all the different zones and what's playing. And sometimes it's really crap. But it is funny that almost everybody does like listening to music while they code. But again, a little bit back to the talk. How are we going to fix this? And I propose that the future of the web, the way we're really going to fix things, is to use technologies like Jamstack. How many people in the room have heard of Jamstack? Good, we got about 5 or 6. That's very cool. So Jamstack is a fancy term that basically just means we have a JavaScript system in play. Might use some APIs to do some things, but at the end of the day, it's markup. So JavaScript API markup, Jam, that's how we got to Jamstack. And really, we're talking about generating HTML. So there's nothing fancy about this HTML. It's just a good-looking screenshot, I'll be honest. But basically, these systems come up with very creative ways to make it so that HTML is ready for us the minute the browser asks for it. And it does it by typically using what's called a static site generator. And when it does that, we get away from the dynamic side of things where we may have to have a request from a browser that hits a server, that hits a database, that runs through a templating engine or multiple, and does all these crazy things, maybe pulls API information from other places, and it might take a couple hundred milliseconds to actually make that first request. In a static site world with Jamstack, the goal is that the minute the browser makes the request to the server, everything's ready there, already. It's already generated and fast. And typically it's served over a content delivery network. So that way, no matter where in the world you are, you can get it very, very fast. And I'm going to go into a little bit of those results today because I think it's striking how fast that you can actually make these things work. And I think it's the future of where we're going. The number 1 static site generator is Gatsby. Gatsby.js is really an amazing little tool. It's basically a node package that you can run on any machine. And it does a great job of determining how you're going to generate all this HTML that we're going to serve to our users really, really fast. And on top of Gatsby, the most common way to deploy the site it generates is on Netlify. In fact, there's automatic commands in the Gatsby tool, the CLI tool, that basically you can say deploy, and it pushes it right to a bucket in Netlify, and all of a sudden you have a CDN version of your site with like zero work. It's really cool. They have a free tier. I'm not related to them in any way, but I do think that it's a pretty cool system. However, I'm not going to use this one today in our demo because I'm a Microsoft guy, so Microsoft Azure actually has the same capabilities, well, almost the same capabilities from static site hosting than Netlify does. But before I go too further, I thought I'd actually show you a result. Smashing Magazine is a tech journal, pretty popular around the world, and they went through this about 1.5 years ago where they completely changed to Gatsby.js static site hosting served over a CDN. And their first time to byte, which is the critical kind of measurement in terms of speed, is that it went from 800 milliseconds to 80 milliseconds. And this is a pretty rich interactive site. This isn't just like a brochure site that does nothing. There's a lot of things that happen on Smashing Mag. Funny thing is, they actually have a Jamstack fundamentals. That was their homepage the other day, or well, when I got the screenshot. And it's something that's striking, that you can have that type of an increase in performance. But I had to do it. We're in Detroit. If this is just static HTML, that's bad, right? No one makes static HTML. What are you going to do if you got to edit it? You want to go edit code and then redeploy every time you got to change a typo? No. Every time you want to change a picture, you want to re-edit things and redeploy? No. So there is a newer term that hopefully takes this from being like an 0 and 16 bad to at least like a this year maybe 6 and 10 bad, right? Maybe even better. But the idea is that there are new services out there called Content as a Service or Headless CMS. Anyone heard the term Headless CMS? I got a few head nods. Okay, cool. There are some really cool ones out there. We're going to talk about one today and how we fix this problem of just having static content. But the idea with Content as a Service is that we're going to create our content model up in the cloud as a microservice. We're going to deliver that content over an API. That's the A in the whole Jamstack thing, right? And we're going to generate the static files from our dynamic content. And then every time the dynamic content changes, the API updates, you can trigger a build, and everything's automatically then dynamic to what the marketing team needs to do or someone else. So it's pretty cool, something that we're starting to specialize in more and more. In fact, one of the ones I really recommend is Kentico Cloud. Kentico Cloud is a headless CMS / content as a service solution. It's kenticocloud.com. And basically, it has a nice little interface like you would expect in a CMS. You can do assets, you can do content types and models, you can do publishing, all the things that you'd want to do in a content management system. But the benefit is, you don't have to worry about standing up the database. You don't have to worry about the install. You don't have to do all these different things to make it work. You just log in and start using it, just like any other tool that you would see. And there are other ones. Gather Content is one. Contentful is probably a big player. Content Stack. So there's multiple headless CMSs because this is becoming such a big trend in the marketing / website world. Whoops, too fast. So what I'm going to show today in the demo is that I'm going to have some homepage content, some blog content in Kentico Cloud. We're going to run it through the Gatsby build command, which will generate static HTML files from our dynamic content. And then we're going to use Visual Studio Code to publish it to a static site hosting area in Azure. That basically is a storage account. So this is what I would represent as like the developer workflow, because you're not going to, again, want to have to publish things from Visual Studio Code on a real working live website. What happens in real working live websites is that you kind of replace the part here where it says Visual Studio Code with something like, GitHub deployments, Bitbucket pipelines, Azure DevOps, any kind of CI tool you can use and plug in, and as long as it can listen to a webhook or an HTTP request, it will publish the code out, right? Luckily, the Kentico Cloud team and the Gatsby.js team have gotten together, they've collaborated, and there's actually a source plugin that makes Kentico Cloud and Gatsby play really nice together. In fact, all you have to do is update your project ID, and then it basically just works. So you don't even have to worry about like the retrieval calls to the API. It's really kind of nice. And the thing that's special, really, about Gatsby is it relies on something called GraphQL. GraphQL is a way to do APIs, but it's more, like it says, a specification of querying data. Like if you were to compare it to a REST API, where the developer really determines the methods and the functionality of the API and how you can work with your consuming the API endpoints, GraphQL kind of reverses the situation. As a developer, you kind of expose a solution for GraphQL, and anyone who's a client of it can change the queries however they want to query the data. If they want to bring back homepage content, product content, related blog posts, they can do all that, and you as the developer don't have to do anything on the server side of the things. So I'll show that a little bit too, because this is really the secret sauce when it comes to how all this works, is the GraphQL mechanism that you can use. And it's actually ridiculously easy because it comes with what's called GraphQL, which is a little developer tool that even has an explorer that basically says, I'm going to look for certain things in Kentico Cloud, and I'm going to bring back the data in a JSON format. And again, the more you craft the GraphQL query, the more succinct or bigger or larger or smaller that your JSON return can be for whatever you need for the page. So with that, it's a lot of talk. How about we do some demos? Okay. So if you want to get started with Gatsby and GraphQL and all this fun stuff, you can open up your favorite editor. I'm going to use VS Code. Does not matter. There's a few prerequisites. You're going to have Node installed on your machine. How many people have Node installed on their machine? Yeah, most people. So I'm not going to go through that. Then you would do the install of the Gatsby package. I'm not actually going to do that to save time because it's documented in like 100 places. It's just the same as you do any other Node package. But basically, I'm just going to make sure everything's ready. I got to spell it right. So this shows that we have Node, and this shows, hopefully, that we have the Gatsby CLI tool installed. And again, all of this is available at GitHub or gatsbyjs.com or .org. I can't quite remember, one of the two. But good, we didn't have an error, so that's cool. The way I really recommend kind of just getting started is using one of the starter site kits that Gatsby has. And to do that, I'm going to grab it by going Gatsby, new, in this folder, the Gatsby JS/Gatsby starter blog. Oh, I did it wrong. Gatsby. Yep, thank you. Live demos are always fun. All right, here, I'm going to cheat. There we go. So this is going to take a second, because what it's going to do is going to pull down basically everything it needs. There's tons of packages it needs. There's a lot of dependencies. What it's bringing down is basically like Webpack, different linters, all these different things that it's doing. And actually, depending on how fast the Wi-Fi is, this could take up to a minute or two. But it's going to bring down the starter template from their GitHub page. And what we're going to do is just kind of go through it a little bit and then generate the result and show you how fast it is once it's downloaded and everything's ready to basically just spin up a Gatsby site. And while that's going, I'm going to take some water. By the way, is that really crazy small in the back? Can you guys kind of see it? Do you want me to zoom even? Okay. Okay, cool. I did zoom. It's weird, you can't like have different zoom levels in VS Code. I wish you could for like the terminal versus the main window, but yeah. All right, so it's done. Okay. And Gatsby, you can use the Gatsby commands, or you can use yarn, or even npm. So it's meant to work with like package managers. I'm going to use yarn just because I can. So I'm going to use yarn develop. Oh, wait, let me see where I'm at. I might have to be in the source directory. Yeah, all right, yarn develop. So what this is going to do is actually start the build of the Gatsby site, and it's going to fire up a Webpack server and kind of get you everything you need to actually work with the Gatsby project. And it's generating all the static files right now from where it thinks it's getting its data from. And in this scenario, it's really getting its data just from the file system, because this starter site has the different blog pages in the file system of where your project is. All right, so it did compile successfully. And here's the main thing. It tells you that running at localhost 8000 is the result of the project. And I thought I would show this first, just so everyone can get an idea of what we're talking about. Yay. Gatsby starter site, really, really complex. We've got a blog homepage with a couple current blog posts. And if I click through to New Beginnings, you have the blog detail. So we have a little bit of a listing functionality, we have a homepage functionality, and then we have detailed blog post pages, right? So we have New Beginnings and we have My Second Post. 2 different sets of blog posts, and then we've also got some navigation to get back and forth. This is pretty much everything you need to start with Gatsby. So, what happens here is that Gatsby basically uses React to do all the actual somewhat implementation code. But the place you would start is Gatsby config. And here you're going to see that there's a few plugins that make the system work. There's some metadata. That's another kind of data piece that you can work with. And a few other plugins that do various different things. Most of it you're going to get by default when you start any Gatsby project. But the one that's kind of important to understand for just right now is the file system one. So what it's saying is we have blog post content in the directory name /content/blog underneath where we're starting. So if we go to pages or components or one of these things, or sorry, content, blog, here we have Markdown that represents our blog post. So this basically is considered one data source that you can work from. And that plugin, the file system plugin, handles the fact that we're going to take Markdown and transform it into HTML. And that's really what Gatsby does. You can connect it to a database, you can connect it to another API, you can have Markdown, you can have raw HTML sitting in this content directory. That's where the source plugins come in into Gatsby and kind of the magic happens. But I think it's pretty cool that basically all this can come just out of the box with the starter project. From there, everything starts at index.js. And here's where you do your imports of your components and things like that. And you're basically saying, all right, for our blog index, or our homepage in this case, we're going to use some of the metadata that was in the data.site. And that was, again, started from Gatsby config.js. And then we're going to render out some React stuff and components to handle things like the menu, the blog posts, all that kind of good stuff. And if you're a React developer, I'm hoping that this is dead simple and I really don't have to explain it. If you're not a React developer, go check out React. I'm not going to explain that in today's talk. There's not enough time for that. Okay, so pretty common things. And then for you have other components, again a little bit more React, but you're pulling together HTML from your data, and that's all you really have to do. When you do build it or run in development, it basically puts everything that's resulting of the build in the public directory. And that's, again, where you can actually go see, like, here is the page of HTML that it generated. Well, it's a little bit more complex than that. I'm not going to actually go into all of it. There's not enough time left because I have a couple other things I want to do. So the general idea, though, you download it, you hook it up to your data, it generates HTML. Is that making sense to everybody? Any questions so far? Okay. All right, so let's switch to a little bit bigger example, and one that uses Kensco Cloud for getting data. Oh wait, shoot, there's one thing I want to do first. I want to show the GraphQL Explorer, because that's where, when I was first looking at all this stuff, that's the place I went first, because it was like, oh my gosh, this is really cool, and I have to figure this part out before I can generate things. And This also just comes natively with the package. But the difference there was instead of just 8,000, we're going to run this special URL ___ GraphQL. And that's really small. Come on. So, the first thing, if you want to look at what data you're connecting to your Gatsby site, is the Explorer. And here is a good way to represent, remember when I showed you the metadata in the JSON? It's actually in here as well as edges. Edges are kind of the objects, the groups of objects, and a node is one of those objects in the query system. So if I click site data, we have a query that says I want all the edges of my site. And actually this is from last night me screwing around, so let me do it a little bit simpler. So I want to do a query of edges, and I want to include, oh, where'd it go? Where'd it go? Maybe I got the wrong one again, sorry. Edges, why can't I see it? All right, well, I'm looking for site info. But as you see, as I navigate down through this stuff, it's basically exposing everything that we have in our data sets. And the idea would be, oh, site, not all site. That's probably going to be better. Well, anyways, I'll grab the children and click run. And you can't see the results. That's empty. Maybe not a great result. So, yeah. Edges, no children. All right, well, I'm gonna fail at this demo, but anyways. The idea is that you can kind of plug and play through that, add in the different fields of the content, click play, and you're gonna get your JSON results. I'm not entirely sure. Just going to give it one more shot. So there's the site. There it is. Site metadata. And you're starting to see that now as the client-side developer, I can grab the different parts of the data sources that we have in the server, but me as the server-side developer, I don't have to worry about making a full REST API that has every one of these endpoints. So that's kind of the power of GraphQL. All right. So now knowing a little bit more about GraphQL, I'm going to switch to a full kind of different example. And in this example, again, starting with the Gatsby config.js, we have a new plugin that's the Gatsby Source Kensiko Cloud plugin. As long as we tell the project ID of the project that we want to consume with Gatsby, that's going to bring in all the data. Because at the end of the day, if we look at Kensiko Cloud, and here is the example for Kensiko Cloud, we can see that there's content in the system. If I want to edit a blog post, I can click on it, as you would expect, and I can change it to not just be Latin lorem ipsum. I can say, my first blog post. And then I would publish the contents. Yes, it's fine. I'm going to publish it now. And again, this is just running inside of a software as a service. And when I publish it, it makes it available at its own API. It's in there. So this is the deliver API for Kensiko Cloud. It pulls it together and brings it into something you can use. So I'm going to now develop this one. Darn it. Okay, and it's going to run for a second. What it's going to do is it's going to call that deliver API that we just looked at. It's going to generate a home page that has all those different content items in it. And when it's done running, I'm going to show you the results. And sure, forgot to close off the other one. That's a nice thing about Webpack Server, it just figures it out. So you can see actually we're creating different nodes of content from each of our aspects that we have in the Kentico Cloud system. And where is my... Is it still running? Didn't tell me what port it's using. Oh, there it is. So this example has a little bit more information on it. It still is generated from the features that we saw in Kentico Cloud. I'll go back and show those again because I went really fast. But here's our blog posts. And you know what? I may not have published it the right way. Otherwise, that's supposed to say my first blog post. But you get the idea, right? It's the same kind of concept. And the thing that is, I think, impressive is that, oop, not there yet. All right, well, I'm gonna skip that too. Sorry, I'm running a little bit low on time. Basically, the thing that is impressive is how fast this runs when you push it from your machine up to a CDN. So what I wanna do is actually show how easy that is, because that's gonna be something that you can either do through the CLI or through VS Code if you have an extension. What I have actually for the deployment target for this project is actually a static site hosting blob storage account in Azure. And basically that is running right here. Anybody use Azure these days? Wow, no one in the room uses Azure. Okay, one guy in the back. Azure's really cool. You can do a lot of cool things with it if you're in the .NET world or even other worlds. Java, Node, all that kind of stuff is supported. But I have a storage container here. And one of the things that you can use for storing things in the cloud is actually converting it to a static website. So in Azure, if you enable one little toggle, which is right there, it says anything in this storage account, I will serve out as HTML, and I will be the IIS server or the web server for you. And that is then the place that I can push and build this static files with Gatsby to have them hosted. And the way you would do that is go to your public directory. And the cool thing is, in Visual Studio or VS Code, there's an extension that says Azure Deployment Options or Azure Static File, one of the two. It gives you this option, and you say deploy. It's activating the extension at the bottom. It's logging me in to my Azure account, and I actually have multiple storage accounts because I do a lot of Azure stuff. But the Gatsby storage account shows up right there. And I'm not actually going to deploy it because I actually have it up there already, and it takes like another 30 seconds or almost a minute. But you just pick it, and then it pushes the files up to Azure for you. And once they're pushed up for you, you can simply grab this URL. Sorry, it's kind of small for the people in the back. And you get your static file hosting at a public container on the internet that if you want to put a custom domain name on top of that, you can. But you get basically a very fast loading website. This even has like an animation that makes it seem a little slower, but trust me, it's ridiculously fast. In fact, it's so fast that when I was doing this back home, come on, I got it in 19 milliseconds for time to first byte, right? That's ridiculous. So you're gonna do any other thing with a database involved, it's going to take more than 19 milliseconds to look up the DNS connection to the database, right? So this is the power and the speed of this solution. So there's definitely a little bit of a learning curve to kind of getting up to all the GraphQL and Gatsby and CLI and CDN and all that stuff. But the result is pretty killer, in my opinion. And you don't have to take my word for it. There's actually a great resource at jamstack.org. Funny enough, one of their examples is actually the Kentico developer community that kind of goes into all this stuff. But they have a lot of examples, at least like 9 or 10 or 12 or even more examples that go into, here's the stack that built this site. And you can see that like, the Kentico developer community has Gatsby, React, Kentico Cloud. But you don't need to use those things, right? You can use, this one uses Netlify CMS, which is the same thing as Kentico Cloud, GitHub. It's just kind of cool that there's all these great examples for this technology. So something I really definitely recommend checking out. And I'll let the gentleman over there take a picture. Perfect segue. Go right ahead.
Okay. So you got me really interested in the static pages because all of a sudden you can probably start hashing those things and just have a history by date and hash of every day or every change that your website has. So when someone shares your site, you can store all those things, and then if they share like your main page with like I don't know, like your SHA-1 hash of that specific site, they can go back in time and get that exact thing, and that seems really powerful. Do you know if anything does that right now, or?
I don't know if a plugin that does that from a source standpoint of URL version history, basically by hash.
Because like this Smashing Magazine site's really cool that you showed in the beginning. It's like, oh well, if you had the article up there, you want to see some main page with those like things together, you can just share that with that specific thing with that like hash and the URL.
I do know that almost all of the content as a service sites, like Kensico Cloud, Contentful, and Content Stack, they all have a history API that you can request a specific version, because every time that you publish content, it's making versions of it, just like a CMS would. And if you wanted to, in your React routing, pass like the version identifier, whether it's a hash key or something, up to that API, you could definitely serve out like that specific version at any point in time. It's a good question. Other questions? Okay, no problem. Well, there's my contact info. Appreciate you guys listening today. Hope you learned something a little bit new. And with that, I think that's everything I got.